Hello, this is Sherman Haywood Cox II of SoulPreaching.com and LearnBlackPreaching.com. In this particular video, we want to talk about the steps that one can take to avoid a dull sermon. How to avoid a dull sermon. Quickly, we're going to talk about uh, important points to remember. You should have vocal energy, you should have a sound theology, and a knowledge of language. Vocal energy. This particular point includes having sermon intensity, natural enthusiasm. It's important to recognize that there is not only one way to show your enthusiasm. Different preachers will show their enthusiasm in different ways. Likewise, there's different ways to show sermon intensity. As I've spoken of in other videos, you can actually elevate your volume, but also even going down in volume can actually increase intensity. The material being important is another way to increase intensity. Natural enthusiasm is a really big point while emphasizing the natural component. We as preachers should be enthusiastic about the message that we are presenting, and it should be natural. If we do all of these things, we will have a vocal energy that will help to keep our sermons from being dull. If it's a natural enthusiasm, if the sermon intensity actually grows over the life of the sermon, as well as if we have a natural way of showing our enthusiasm in the particular presentation, then we will have a strong vocal energy that will help to keep our sermons from turning into dull, lifeless performances. Another very important thing is to have a sound theology. A sound theology. There's a couple of points that we should keep in mind when talking about a sound theology. One is that our theology is consistent. There is nothing worse than to hear a preacher this week preaching something and then next week preaching the exact opposite. This happens a lot. In fact, I was talking to a member the other day who had great problems with his pastor, not because he disagreed, but because there was no coherent theology being presented that was consistent. So, if we are to avoid a dull sermon, we should have theological consistency. In addition, we should have a correct theology. It's one thing to be consistent, but it's also another thing to be correct. We must recognize, however, that we will grow and learn as time goes on. However, as preachers, we are to specialize in that which we know to be true. If we don't know something is true, then we aren't going to specialize or emphasize that. This is going back to this theological integrity. We only preach that which we agree with. In fact, if we do not believe what we're teaching, we will not be able to have the vocal energy that was spoken of in the previous. We won't have the natural enthusiasm for the presentation. So we should be consistent, we should have a correct theology, we should have integrity to only preach that which we agree with and not preach things that we don't agree with. However, the final point is to also clearly explain our struggles. This once again is to talk about the integrity. We don't specialize in that which we disagree with. However, we do recognize that we have struggles with certain theological perspectives. We have struggles with certain things that we are attempting to fight with or attempting to do. So it's important to have if we're going to have a sound theology, we should have a correct theology. We should have theological consistency. We should have theological integrity in that we only speak that which we do we don't say things that we agree with when we don't, and we don't, and the other, we don't disagree with things that we actually agree with. That's a part of your theological integrity. And finally, we want to clearly explain our struggles, especially if there's important issues, important doctrines that are problematic in a particular uh, ecclesial tradition. We will have to address some of these things, and we should clearly explain our struggles if we are having such things. Now, another important point to keep in mind if we're going to avoid a dull sermon is to have a knowledge of language. We should have a knowledge of words. What do the words mean? What do different words mean? I remember I was having a discussion with a preacher at one point, and we were discussing and laboring over a particular wording for a committee. And I finally told the pastor that this is nothing but rhetoric. This is nothing but uh, the way of saying things, and we're spending too much time worrying about rhetoric. The preacher then told me that words is all we have, and later on I began to realize and recognize the truth that was in what he's saying. There is importance in finding the correct word, exactly the right word, to be precise in our selection of the words. So to do that, you need a knowledge of words. Next, we need a knowledge of how words are processed. Different words, there may be, we have to keep in mind and know how people are going to hear certain words. For example, there are words such as ignorant that actually does not imply stupidity in its classical sense. All of us are ignorant of certain things. However, to use such a word in some context will be heard as you are calling somebody stupid, or you are calling somebody dumb. If we wish to be understood, we have to understand how words are processed and how words are understood. Finally, knowledge of language. In our sermons, we must clearly articulate that which is important. You know, you've got main points and you've got sub points. And sometimes, if you don't clearly articulate or clearly point to your main points, people will come away only thinking about the sub points, and that can be problematic in that your sub points may be a side issue, they may be a side point, but the main points are must be clearly presented and clearly put forth to the people if we are going to preach sermons that are not dull. So these are the three things that we need if we're going to preach a sermon that's not dull. We need to have vocal energy. We need to have vocal energy. We need to have a sound theology, and we need to have knowledge of language. I thank you for listening to this video. My name is Sherman Haywood Cox II of LearnBlackPreaching.com. I encourage you to come to soulpreaching.com and learnblackpreaching.com to find more resources just like this one. God bless you and keep on preaching.